Hello and welcome back to the Fighting Talk 2 channel. We are the Fighting Talk 2 team. Myself, Mr. Fighting Talk, joined in casual corner by George, the man himself. How are we doing, George? I see you're sporting a lovely t-shirt there.
Absolutely, mate. Of course, as we always say at the end of the show, you can get one on the website. Definitely buy one. They are lovely.
We've actually sent a few over to the States as well. So thank you very much to everyone that has been buying them. And obviously the t-shirt is a little bit more exciting to come through the post than the performances we had last night on the whole. It was, it is difficult for the UK fans in general to stay up until 3, 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. But when we have decision after decision after decision after decision, on the prelims, the only fight that people would have expected to probably go to the decision, because they usually do, no offense to the women out there, but the women's fights usually go to decision. But on the prelims, it was the only one to get a finish. Unbelievable. We had ups and downs yesterday, obviously. We had a lot of eye pokes. I feel like it was eye poke city yesterday. And did the UFC not see the fact that the gloves need to be changed? We have this same conversation all the time. The gloves need to be changed if you're getting that many eye pokes. It's very, very frustrating. But the thing I want to start off with, this guy's got a lot of hype around him, right? Yusuf Zalal. He obviously took another loss yesterday. What's this kid doing? He was supposed to be the next up and comer, but it doesn't seem to be going that way.
Yeah, and the other weird thing about Yusuf Zalal is I just saw after his fight, he was kind of like, well, I won't say exactly what he says because we'll be on the radio, but kind of like stuff happens basically. It's almost like his mindset is not like I'm desperate to win, I'm going to die to win, further myself. It's like he's kind of just there to kind of turn up, give it a go and pick up paychecks. And that's obviously if you want to be a superstar in this sport, that's not the attitude to hold. So, yeah, it's been a pretty difficult few months for Zalal. Like you said, he had a lot of hype, but he needs to get back to that drawing board and in Colorado and really think about where he's going, because he's heading in the wrong direction to what we thought he was going to be sort of 6 to 9 months ago.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe a change of camp. We were speaking on the previous episode, maybe a change of camp. Maybe sometimes people just need that fire underneath them to really get going, And a person that was on the prelims yesterday that we're going to have a nice little chat about is Mason Jones, right? Because he's changed camp now. He's training out of the PI. And wow, he looked fantastic yesterday. That was like a completely different person in there from his first fight. In his first fight in the UFC, I get it, the bright lights are on, but I thought he looked very, very hesitant in his first fight. Yesterday, he looked like an absolute sniper, didn't he? He looked like an absolute sniper. Tell me what you took away from his performance, and then we can talk a little bit about the eye poke as well and what concluded the fight.
Well, it was, like you said, it was a super, super encouraging performance. Clearly the work that he's been doing at the PI and the Team Alpha Male in California is obviously paying dividends. I love it when I see British guys who want to go and further their all-round game, leave the comforts of home to go and do that. And clearly it was very obvious right from the outset last night with Mason Jones that kind of wrestling that maybe was the question mark potentially over him, when Alan Patrick was kind of shooting for those takedowns, although they were obvious, he was able to defend them pretty routinely. And that was a question mark when he came into the UFC. So clearly the work that he's doing at the PI and with Uriah Faber at Alpha Male is definitely paying off. But the biggest thing is, like you just said, he was an absolute sniper, wasn't he? He was clearly winning the fight. He was doing everything right. And the guy that we've been telling everyone across the pond that we'd seen in Cage Warriors was kind of coming out in an even bigger way last night. He was coming out on a UFC level and was showing that despite the first loss, despite getting it tactically wrong, which clearly he did in that first one, he fought the wrong fight against Mike Davis. He was much more well-measured. He was much more sensible with the approach. And if Mason Jones is able to continue to develop like that going forwards, then wow, that's a very exciting British talent we've got on our hands, indeed. And so it's such a shame how it ended, such a shame, because he was winning that fight so clearly. But I'm sure the UFC are going to get him back out there pretty quickly. I think that's a sensible move for Mason Jones to make.
Completely. And it was a weird way that it finished. Obviously, Patrick was he was out on his feet. Do you know what I mean? It took quite a few licks. He didn't want to be in there. You could see it. He would, recharge his batteries for a little bit. He'd go for a couple of looping hooks, and then he'd just do this, I'm diving down to take your legs now, little sprawl or little move out the way by Mason Jones. He was doing some really cool stuff as well, really trying to set up the uppercut on the way in. And, I thought, fantastic performance from Mason Jones. But it was just that palming off when he was trying to keep distance, when Patrick was against the fence, little eye poke. He went to the floor before the doctor had even come in. He was basically like, right, I don't want to continue. I can't see. He's a veteran. And the commentators even said, I remember Dominic Cruz even said, these crafty veterans, because anyone else that was in that position of his age as well, I think he was, 35, 36, he's, on the back end of his career. They know that you get 5 minutes. So it's either, right, I'm going to get kicked in the nuts here, or I'm going to get an eye poke, and then I'm going to take my full 5 minutes to recharge. But he knew he had nothing left. And he thought, you know what? I've been poked in the eye here. It was inadvertent. I'm not going to take any time. The doctor didn't even check him over. I thought it was unbelievable, because it happened later on in the fight, in the night, and the fighter went, no, I'm continuing, because he was up. He was up on the scorecards, and he knew he was up. But what do you think about the no contest then? Because they'd made it quite a few minutes into the rounds, and it was clear that Mason Jones was going to win. Do you think he should have the doctor could have said, look, it's difficult because you can't see through their eyes. That's the thing. We need x-rays and we need MRIs and stuff to be cage side, so that we can see if they're actually bluffing or not, But
last night, I agree with you. Alan Patch didn't want to be there no more. And, I hate to say that a guy quit on himself, but that's kind of the impression I got, was kind of like, he was like, I don't want any more of Mason Jones, and this is a way out for me, basically. It wasn't quite like a Bilal Muhammad, Leon Edwards eye poke, where clearly he's in some serious kind of pain. I mean, I'm not saying he wasn't in any pain, but it didn't feel like that if he was there for kind of like 5 minutes that he would, he wouldn't be able to recover, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, I was frustrated for Mason Jones. And, this isn't the first time. Obviously, Dominic Cruz was saying about crafty veterans, and it's not the first time that Alan Patrick is gassed, basically. This is quite a common theme of him. So I think when it all lined up for him, he was kind of like, I can see a way out here. And that's that's hard. It feels really wrong to say that the guy just decided that he didn't fancy it anymore, but that's certainly the impression I got, but we'll talk about it again, the glove situation. When will the UFC learn their lesson? Other promotions have changed the gloves and they don't get eye pokes anymore. Even if they do, it's unbelievably rare. And I just think that it just doesn't make any sense. They've just changed all the kit deal with Venom. Did they not want to change the glove deal to try and get a new glove in? It just seems bonkers, because we're having fights ruined or having fights called off, and it's pointless. Like, Mason Jones should be sat in Vegas tonight, today, with a first win in the UFC. That's what should be happening. If we had better gloves, would Leon Edwards even be fighting Nate Diaz next weekend, or would he be fighting for a title soon if he'd beaten Bilal Muhammad? It's not all these kind of questions will get asked. So I think UFC have got to look at it at some point. But yeah, certainly last night for me with Mason Jones and Alan Patrick, it was certainly a heavy feeling of a guy quitting on himself, and an unfortunate night, which started out so positively for Mason.
Absolutely, man. But like you say, I think the UFC can definitely get him in, and definitely get him in as quick as possible. He didn't really look like he took loads of damage yesterday. I think he was wearing a little bit of blood, but I believe it's from an elbow to Patrick that then he was kind of like, Mason Jones had a little bit of blood on him. He was very apologetic as well. And it's nice to see, in MMA. You know, they're extremely apologetic. I'm really sorry. You know, I know what I did, blah, 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 and stuff like that. In other sports, you know, mixed martial arts and boxing are really the only two sports that I watch, you know, religiously. But from my brief encounters of watching football and, you know, tennis or whatever, when a person does something wrong and they know they've done something wrong, they will just lie and, you know, kick off and stuff like that. And you just think you can't even compare a sport like football to mixed martial arts with regards to how some of the fighters, you know, carry themselves and the respect that they have for their opponents and stuff, you know. But talking of pulling out, right, and giving up on yourself, what happened with Tom Breeze yesterday? What do you think happened?
Okay. Look, it's not an unknown quantity that obviously Tom Breeze has his fair share of like mental health problems. That has been a theme throughout his career. And it's not the first time on the night of a fight he's pulled out of a fight, you know, and I mean, I don't know personally, but the talk within the UFC is that it is it's an anxiety problem that he has on the highest stage, and he obviously, that would be the only logical reason for pulling out last night. I don't think it would be injury so late on. Clearly, his anxiety took over again, and he couldn't, you know, come out to perform. And I think the sad thing is that clearly Tom Breeze needs to go and take time away from fighting to go and seek the help that he requires for his anxiety, if it is anxiety that caused him not to fight last night. And it's also a sadness and a shame because he is so talented. Like, when Tom Breeze is on form, that is not just physically but mentally as well. You can see that he performs at such a high level. There's a very clear kind of difference between the two Tom Breezes, one that is not quite on it and one that is. There's a huge difference between the two. I don't know quite where the UFC go Tom Breeze, though. That's the kind of big question now, I think, that people are posing, because there is this, you know, how can we be sure that he's actually going to commit to walking out and actually having the fight? I think you have to, at some point, go, we can't continue to do this. But I wouldn't do that yet. I think he needs to, like I said, needs to go away, seek the help that he perhaps requires, and hopefully come back a better mixed martial artist mentally. I think physically he's absolutely fine, but mentally he clearly needs to do some work, and that's totally cool. But yeah, such a shame that he couldn't fight last night, and that we didn't get a chance to see him.
It is, and you know, when something is kind of sheltered, obviously, like a mental health issue, and no one can see it. Do you know what I mean? No one can see the fact, you see what he's struggling with. If it was a broken leg or a torn ACL, or he had his ear hanging off because of hard sparring or whatever, I think people are a little bit more lenient of it because they can physically see that, oh, you know what, Darren Till broke his collarbone, he definitely can't fight. Whereas when it's more mental, it's, you know, I feel like the fans don't give him enough, you know, they don't take off any pressure. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, oh, he quit. Oh, there's nothing wrong with him physically. He should still be fighting. Do you know what I mean? I think it's a little bit unfair, but they obviously didn't disclose that it was anything. They didn't really disclose anything yesterday, did they? I'm not sure if Tom put anything on Instagram or any social media platforms, but
no. And I think this actually needs to be a conversation point, though, because if last night in the locker room Tom Breeze had broken his ankle, they would have gone, Tom Breeze is out of tonight's fight because he's broken his ankle.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and obviously I understand with mental health, you know, it's it feels more personal. It is more personal. And maybe Tom Breeze doesn't want to say why maybe he had to pull out last night. And I get that. But personally, for me, if Tom Breeze had come out and gone, look, I've got a terrible anxiety problem, and last night my anxiety was too much and I couldn't fight, at no point would I go, oh, what? Like, if you're physically fine, get on with it. I'll go, do you know what? I really appreciate the honesty. It's totally cool. Absolutely fine. And I hope that you can go away and get all the required help that you need, like you would do if you had a physical injury, to come back and perform time. I feel like there is that still in combat sport. There is still that stigma, and maybe a little bit, that if you're physically fine, then just crack on and get on with it. You should just be mentally strong anyway. Not everyone can be a Kamaru Usman, can they? Some people just don't have that kind of mindset. Tom Breeze clearly is one of those people, and it's fine. But I just hope, like I said, I just hope that he's able to find the help that he requires that allows him to perform at his best ability.
No, completely. And when people go through things emotionally as well, obviously we're going to see if Israel Adesanya is going to be 100% mentally ready next week, when he's obviously lost someone very, very close to him and his team. And, if he'd broken his foot last week, everyone would be like, what, he's broken his foot, fair enough. He might not perform as well, or if he just sprained his ankle. But when you lose someone, and someone that's obviously very close to yourself and very close to your team, you just don't know how they're going to perform. You don't know how they're going to perform in there. And can you blame it on that? Yeah, of course you can. Of course you can say, look, I wasn't in the right place mentally. But yeah, it's like you say, it is still very, very difficult to get over the mental side of stuff compared to the physical side of stuff as well, man. But on the prelims, definitely. Tell me, what else inspired you? I know you actually made it through the prelims. They started at 10 p.m. here in the UK, which was very, very nice. But I could have had a little nap and then woken up just for the co-main and the main event, it would seem.
Yeah, man. Yeah, no, I think the only one to really talk about on the prelims is obviously Manon Fiorot, the only finish of the night. I said on the preview show that a lot of kind of journalists or people in the MMA world have been talking her up quite highly. And I can see why. She is an incredibly aggressive, multi-kickboxer style fighter, and she has got some serious punching power, some serious hands. I mean, admittedly, obviously, this was a late, last-minute replacement, but even still, you can only fight what's in front of you. And for however long it lasted, what was it, 8 minutes, 9 minutes? It was pretty much routine. And when you're looking for people, we said this back at 262 when we were talking about Arujo, like kind of coming up in those rankings, someone that can actually challenge Valentina, could give her an actual fight. Maybe Fiorot, as she continues to develop and continues to get better, that kind of heavy punching power might end up meaning she ends up becoming a top contender, a top title contender. So yeah, that was probably it was the most exciting thing on the prelims for sure. And it was nice to actually get to see her fight. All the hype, you want to see the person deliver, and she certainly delivered last night.
And just as a last minute replacement, is it Ricci or Richie? What was the lady's surname?
Yeah, Tabitha Ricci.
Ricci. I have got no issues with her stepping into the octagon whenever she wants to, right? Just from a visual perspective, she looked like a very good fighter, and I'd be happy to see her on the roster every week. It's not a problem. But I did feel like there was a massive size difference between the two ladies. One of them was obviously Ricci was quite a lot bit shorter and a lot thicker, whereas Manon was obviously quite a lot taller. It seemed she had a massive back as well, big. It looked like David and Goliath in there. But like you say, man, fantastic hands. Just crack there, like pinpoint precision every single time. Very, very good performance. Very, very good. And if she's finishing people, I think her record was like 6-1 or 6-2 or something, right? She hasn't got loads of fights on her record.
No, she's I mean, a lot of these French fighters seem to have very small professional records. Like think about like Cyril Gane, who's only had 8 professional fights. The same for Fiorot, who's only had a few fights. I think she's now 7-1. I think her win streak's 5 now. So yeah, I wouldn't be too surprising if she's not far away from being. I don't think she's ranked yet, but she must be super close now.
It's because the MMA was illegal in France, wasn't it? So when it got made legal, then everyone got their pro cards and decided to jump on the bandwagon. So they're obviously fighting quite a bit before that in various different disciplines. But with mixed martial arts, I think that's why they're going to have quite a lot of these French fighters that are going to come over are going to have very, very short records unless they've left the country to fight fight competitively. Yeah.
Definitely.
We had a few heavyweight fights last night, and the one that disappointed everyone was Tanner Boser versus Ilir Latifi, a veteran. Both of these guys are veterans, as we spoke about on the pre-fight show. And it was wildly underwhelming, wasn't it? It was just, there wasn't a great amount going on for me. We always speak about these heavyweight fights and we think, right, we're going to get in there, everything's going to happen, someone's getting knocked out. This is not lasting more than 5 minutes, and we get 15 minutes of snoozing. Obviously, the big ticket got his ticket punched in the co-main, and literally got his ticket punched. He got completely floored, which is fantastic, which is good. Well, it's good that we saw a little bit of action. It's good that we saw some action. But before we get to the co-main and the main event, we obviously had Ponzinibbio coming back after a loss, after a long time off of injury. George, I know you're very high on Miguel Baeza as well. Tell me, man, What did you take away from that performance? Because Miguel looked fantastic in the first round, and then did Ponzinibbio turn it up, or did Miguel turn it down? What happened?
I think it was a little bit of both, but more Ponzinibbio turning it up, more Ponzinibbio bringing out all that veteran experience, and a huge learning curve fight. I think for Baeza, I think he'll look back on this performance last night, and he will have learned a lot about how to manage your way through 15 minutes. Because if you're going to be a title contender, you're going to have to go for 25 essentially. So you need to learn how to manage your time as best as possible. I think the other thing as well, this was brilliant matchmaking. It produced certainly fight of the night, could even be potentially a contender. I don't think it will be, but a potential contender for fight of the year, but I don't think it will be. Baeza came out, and Baeza was doing exactly what I thought he was going to do, and that was kind of chopping away at the front leg of Ponzinibbio. You see, he was really reddening it up, and I was like, that's going to cause Ponzinibbio a problem with that kind of heavy striking that he throws. And it was a very clever and tactical first round from Baeza, and he clearly won it. But Ponzinibbio, obviously, like I said, with all that experience, came out in 2 and 3 and started to kind of put it together, started to piece Baeza up a little bit, started to cause him a few more problems, started to do what he was doing to Baeza was doing to him, and started chopping away at that front leg, and you could see it starting to pay. And clearly what's happening was that Baeza, with that kind of less experience, was starting to slow down, was starting to get a bit more lethargic, it seems. And I think that almost gave Ponzinibbio a second wind, and he kind of found his main gear. And in that kind of that second and third round, he was able to get two 10-9s and win that fight. But yeah, Ponzinibbio needed that win after the Jing Lang performance in January, where he got knocked out. He certainly needed to get back on the win column. And I think for Baeza, although unfortunate to lose your winning record, and it obviously would have been amazing if he had won, he would have then been ranked, I think, in the top 10 probably after that. I think it's not the end of the world. I think it's a great learning experience fight. He's so young. He'll come back. He's got so much time, and he's definitely still, for me, a future title contender at 170.
Yeah, exactly. Because I know you're pretty hot on this guy, and he's got a very, very good physique for the 170 as well. He's not too short. He's not too tall. He's very, very lean as well. I thought his footwork was fantastic. His hands were very crisp as well. And, you think this guy's going to go right to the top, right?
Yeah, man. I think like these young kids coming through. I think Baeza came from LFA as well. I think like him and Adrian Yanez as well. They've got this really, really well developed striking style. And okay, the all-round game needs working on, but when you've got such good natural pure striking, which clearly Baeza has, it will take you a long way initially. And if you can, as you're coming up, I think he's only 25 years old, so as you're coming up, if you can work on the wrestling and the groundwork and all this kind of stuff, then by the time you come to being 30 in the prime of your career, you're a very dangerous all-rounded mixed martial artist. And I think that's what you'll see Baeza develop over the next kind of 4 or 5 years.
And that's the thing, we're seeing these fighters that are so, so young. and they're really, really at the top of their game. I feel like, when I started watching MMA and, the UFC in particular, the champs and the real contenders and stuff were kind of like 33, 34. But it seems like with every year that goes on, they're just getting younger and younger and younger and younger. And it's fantastic to see. It's fantastic to see. But sometimes it does look a little bit mismatched when you have like the Mason Jones fight, for instance. You have a 25-year-old versus a 34-year-old, and you think, but there's probably they're both in the same kind of ranking system around the same kind of area, but the experience level must play a massive, massive part. And these kind of like young bucks coming through, trying to take over the throne. And it's, I think it's going to cause some real problems in the next couple of years, because we're going to have, champions that are going to be 23, 24, but then where do you go from there? If you're the champ at 24, where do you go? Do you keep that belt for like 10 years and then retire? But even then, you're only 34. You're technically coming into the prime of your career. And then what happens? We see this in Hollywood all the time, when you have like childhood stars, and then all of a sudden they make it big and do a load of drugs and stuff, and then bang, that's it. They don't know what to do with themselves. John Jones, prime example. Did he get the belt too early? Did he get the belt too early and it was too much pressure for him? And then he has to, do peds and mow people over and shoot his gun and in his car and do random stuff because he's trying to fulfill his life again, because he can't chase that initial getting the belt for the first time. What's your take on this?
Well, the other one as well is Rose Namajunas. When she won the belt for the first time, she said that she couldn't deal with the pressure of it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe fighters, when they are young and they become champions, they do find it too much. I think Rose and Jones are two perfect examples. Clearly, of two people who have struggled with it. I think as well, what's happening at the moment is a lot of these smaller promotions like Cage Warriors, Cage Fury, LFA, KSW, whoever it is, the fighters are getting into the UFC a lot quicker than perhaps they used to.
Mm-hmm.
And so they are getting in maybe 3 or 4 years quicker. That's obviously then making them potential contenders or champions a lot younger. And that's why we're obviously seeing this pattern happen. It could be that they're just developing better and developing quicker. I've always said that I don't see much harm in staying in those small promotions for a longer period of time, because then when you come to the UFC, you kind of rounded out the kind of problem areas of your game, should we say? So I think that's probably a major reason why. But yes, certainly when you are having younger champions, clearly the two good examples of people that have struggled, it clearly does happen, and that's no shame. Fame gets, I'm sure fame gets to the best of people. So yeah, it's a difficult situation though, but I imagine it's going to be that kind of way though. We are going to see 24, 25, 26-year-old UFC champions over the next few years.
Yeah, I think maybe, there should be like a path, the pathway to the UFC, right? You need to do some regional stuff until you're, I don't know, you've had 5 fights in the regional. Do you know what I mean? There's one near me called like Fight Star Champions or something. Do you know what I mean? And then you go to Cage Warriors, for instance, and then you got to do at least kind of 7 fights in Cage Warriors. Wins, losses, doesn't matter. And then you go to somewhere like LFA or Bellator or somewhere like this, you know what I mean? And then you have a couple of fights that you have to have at least 4 or 5 there. And then you can move up. Do you know what I mean? It's like a little tiered system. Because some of these people, like we talk about Chase Hooper, he's straight in at the UFC. Where do you go from there? You take a couple of losses, and then what? Do you go back to the regional circuit? But you've been in the UFC. Now you're fighting someone that's, I don't know, a maths teacher Monday to Friday and just does this because he enjoys it. It's very strange, It's very, very strange.
Yeah, totally. A good example of someone who's young and up and coming, who might end up in the UFC very soon, is Ian Gary in Cage Warriors. He's fighting for the welterweight title in June at the latest trilogy for Cage Warriors. I think he's only like 24, 25. I think he's only had like 6 professional fights in his career. And he's basically saying, once I win the title in June, I want to go straight to the UFC. Like, what would be the problem in defending a belt a few times in Cage Warriors to kind of gain more experience? No one, I'd be right with that. You'd be right with that. No one would think that's stupid. Everyone would probably think that's quite sensible. but clearly this is the mindset of younger fighters, that they want to get to the top of their smaller promotion and then they want to get straight into the UFC. And if the UFC are willing to sign them, then you can be damn sure that they're going to go there. That's the problem, I think.
Yeah, no, completely. But back to the card from yesterday. We had Todorovic. This man's name seems to stick in my head because he's got a very awkward style. He's, he leans back quite a lot for one, which the commentators mentioned about 35 times per minute. But he's taken another loss. I feel like there's a lot of people that were kind of, you have those main prospects that we all kind of spoke about at the beginning of the year, right? The Rachmanovs and the what's his name? What's the other guy? The other Dov.
Matt Muradov.
Yeah, I don't know. There was. You remember we actually spoke about, there was like 9 people. Cyril Garner was in there, various different people.
Yeah.
We were like, right, these are going to be big for this year. And then there's kind of like that secondary group of people, like the Todorovic and the Baeza and the Deledzes and that kind of stuff. And I feel like they're all losing all the time. And it's just a bit strange. What did you make of that fight anyway? Because there was quite a few, last night I feel like there was a few judges that went the other way. There was quite a lot of splits yesterday as well. Again, we always seem to have these same stories of getting the split decisions, but I wasn't too upset. I didn't feel that any fighter was too exciting to have really convinced me to get a to get the W there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, this was kind of in my period where last night was getting a bit boring and I was nodding in and out. But when I think about Todorovic, like, the hype train was big, and I think it's now 2 losses in a row, and like starting to fade a little bit. It's starting to fade a bit quickly, and when you start to lose regularly, I guess the example on a bigger scale would be Kevin Holland. The blueprint starts to come out a little bit of how you beat this guy, and it's not a good or attractive start for Todorovic. I mean, for Gary Rodriguez, on the other hand, it's an amazing start. I mean, like I was saying on the preview show, this guy came in on less than 2 weeks' notice. I think 2 weeks ago he was winning the LFA, middleweight title. So he's like, he's come out of nowhere and he's got to win the UFC. So he's suddenly, and over a guy who's pretty well hyped as well. So suddenly people start talking about Gary Rodriguez. I mean, I know he trains, I think, at American Top Team, so he's training with absolute killers every day down in Coconut Creek. But yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you, in terms of the fight, if I'm being really honest, I did fall in and out of sleep during this one. As the card was going on, I was like, I might have to take a break here. But yeah, I think for Todorovic, it's another one kind of like it's like a back to the drawing board situation. It's like when you come into the UFC and you're really hyped and then you lose a couple, it's like you need to get a win. Like, you need a win now. It's not like you can't afford to go and lose again immediately. So he's got to certainly find his way. And for Gary Rodriguez, I just enjoy it, to be honest. You were fighting for an LFA title a few weeks back. You won that, which you weren't favourite to win, but you won it. And now you're in the UFC and you've won your first fight in the UFC. Man, just enjoy it. You're going to get yourself a nice contract for sure.
Yeah, no, completely, man. Completely. And it's taking them repeat losses and not having exciting fights, The Lidze, prime example last night, was an absolute snooze fest. I think this was actually at the point where I fell asleep. It was about, 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. And then, 9 times out of 10, I'll stay up and I'll watch them, no matter what time it is. We've been speaking at 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday morning when there's been fights on and it's been really, really exciting and we've got stuff to talk about. But at the moment, I don't know, we've had a few cards that have been real stinkers. And Delidze yesterday was just a boring performance. He got the win. He did what he had to do to get the win, but he did the same thing over and over again. Grab the waist, take the back, and then just walk around the octagon. Just walk around, do another lap. I think it was Bisping actually mentioned that they'd made a full rotation of the octagon with him on his back. And you think, come on, do something, do anything. This is a spectator sport, This is the Colosseum. These are the gladiators going in there. If no one's watching and no one's being exciting, that's why they threw lions back in there. You know, back in the day when the gladiators were fighting, it's a bit boring. Let's just chuck a lion in there, see what happens. Then they start moving. Then they want to start killing each other. You know, then they pick up the spears and stuff. That's what they need to do in the UFC. If people start just messing around like the Lindsay did last night, just to scrape this win, chuck a rabid wild cat in there or something. Do something crazy, man. I don't know. Get a car battery, stick it on the cage, and that's it. Go fight now. You know, whenever they get to the octagon side, they go, oh, you know, nice little shock, and then they'll be on their bike and making some movements. And
Yeah.
you know, what am I going to remember from that performance? Sweet FA, nothing at all. I'll remember that it was boring, and that I don't want to talk about it anymore. But you know, where does he go from here? Because if he's going to start putting out these performances, Dana White, the matchmakers, they're not going to put him so high up on the card. He's going to be back to the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, man, he's going back to the bottom of the barrel. And I've said this now, after his last fight. For me, the hype train has truly derailed for Delidze. I don't see it. He's too up and down. He's too hot and cold. Yeah, he's going back to the start of the prelims for the time being. He needs to kind of build his way back up. Out of all the Georgian fighters, and there are some really good ones, I think he might be the poorest of the lot, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. It's a shame. It's a shame. I know you're pretty hot on the guys coming over from Georgia. They're obviously making a lot of noise as a region of the world as well. But straight in, Marcin Tybura versus the big ticket Harris. He obviously had his ticket punched. I've made that joke already. But Marcin Tybura caught the leg, a couple of punches, got him to the ground, finished him off. What do you think? What do you take away from that? Walter Harris has obviously got a very, very, I'm not going to beat around a bush here. He's got a very poor record. You know, I think he's like 10-8 or something now. And you just think, where are we going from here? Where are we going? Are we going to continue? Are we going to change camps? Are we going to have a title contention at some point? I don't know. I really don't. Is he going to challenge for the title? No, he's not. He really, really isn't. You know, sorry, he's 13-10. I'm looking now, 13-10. I mean, that's not good. You know, we're not in boxing. You know, this isn't a boxing podcast. We are MMA fans, and we don't really look at the losses. It is what it is. But when you are 13-10, you've got to look at something. You know, his last 3 fights all lost by TKO. It's just, where does he go from here? Where does he go, George? Tell me.
I said this on the preview show that I always think of Walter Harris, and I always think his record is better than what it is. You know, 13-10 though is, you know, I know we don't really look at losses, but 13-10 is pretty abysmal, isn't it? Like, if we're being honest, it's pretty damn poor. I think at the age Walter Harris is, I think he's in his mid to late 30s. I think he might be now 35, 36, 37. Maybe. 37. I think we could be looking at the end in the UFC for Walter Harris, to be honest.
Mm.
I'm not saying that's the end of his fight career, but I think we're looking at the end. I think he's 3 TKO losses in a row. He's now going to be falling right to the bottom end of the top 15. And actually, when I think about this fight last night, a lot of it was about like Walter Harris and can Walter Harris get back on a winning streak? And maybe it was more actually, this is a great layup fight for Marcin Tybura. This is a great fight to get him to the top 10. You know, I think Tybura doesn't get talked about enough. I think he is a bit of a dark horse. People never mention him. I think his record's now 22-6, which is pretty damn impressive. And I think he's on a very lengthy win streak. I think it's 5 or 6 fights. Mm-hmm. So I think maybe last night, you know, which I fell foul of, it was more, can Walter Harris get back on the winning streak? It was actually more, look, Tybura is really talented. We need even more talent at the top end of this, you know, heavyweight division. And Tybura is someone who can come through and be that person. You know, he's now going to be ranked top 10 on Tuesday, and he is he's looking at a pretty big fight, probably. You know, in that, you know, whoever that is, I'm not sure, but I think the other thing as well is Tybura for me is one of these very good suffocating fighters. Like he kind of it feels like he kind of swarms you, and it felt a bit like that last night with Walt Harris. He kind of sucked all the energy out of Walt Harris very quickly. And yeah, I liked Tybura. I think he's a bit of a dark force going forwards.
No, definitely. We've said this a couple of times, you know, we said this in the pre-fight. We've said this a few times over the past couple of weeks, that the heavyweight division and the light heavyweight division are both making a bit of noise finally after being so quiet for so many years, I think. And even the 125ers, 135ers, you know, the smaller guys, they're making a bit more noise as well, which is nice because the middle section, the 145 to 185, they're always going to be your prime cuts, aren't they? They're going to be your filet mignons, you know. Whereas you got the heavyweights, they're going to be your rump. They're going to be your rump caps that take a bit of time, slow cooking, you know. And then the 125ers, probably like ears or something. I don't know, something awkward. But yeah, it's nice to see that they're putting more heavyweight fights on as well. And obviously, the main fight on the card was jairzinho Rozenstruik coming off of a loss to Cyril Gane in arguably one of the most boring fights of the year so far. Versus Augusto Sakai. And for me personally, if someone gets knocked down at 4 minutes and 59 seconds of the very first round, let them get up. You know, let them get up. To finish a fight at 4:59, I think is just unbelievable. You know, they could have finished that fight. If he can't make it up in like a couple of seconds or whatever, or when the bell goes, if he's not straight up straight away, sat in the chair, then call the fight. Then say we're done. Because you can end it mid-round anyway. Doesn't matter. You can end it mid-round. It will still count as a first-round knockout. But to not let the guy get up, I thought was a little bit selfish. What did you take away from that? Do you think that was the correct decision by the ref?
Yeah, no, I didn't. I think, was it Herb Dean, wasn't it? I think Herb Dean fancied an early night, didn't he?
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
He wanted to get home. I think that was the kind of impression I got anyway. But yeah, no, I find it really weird. Like 4 minutes and 59, 1 second. Like Sakai would have seen himself through that. Sakai would have got himself back up, and he might have then got himself knocked out because he wasn't all there in the second. Maybe, you know, we don't know that, but at least give him the opportunity to try. Like, you know, it is a really weird to stop it at 4 minutes and 59. So yeah, but like we said, it might go one or two ways. That Sakai might ground him out, or Rozenstruik might blitz him and get him out in the first round. And obviously, Rozenstruik blitzed him and got it done. You know, it was more of a classic kind of biggie boy performance, to be honest. It was kind of, you know, I'm just going to go in there. I'm going to be an absolute marauder, push forwards, and I'm going to blitz and see what happens. And sure enough, it did work. But yeah, no, the stoppage was weird. You know, with 1 second to go, it's just, I always find those ones a bit bizarre. You know, kind of in the last kind of like 10 seconds of fight, usually a fighting kind of see their way through potentially to the end of the round, you know, 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, I just think as well, if you get clearly knocked out, you know, the Cody Garbrandt knocked out
Asuncao.
That's it. He knocked out Asuncao.
Yeah.
Clearly, the guy was, you know, he was, you know, folded. He was folded like origami. You know, he folded like a deck chair. Fair enough. He's not making it through the rest, you know. But Augusto Sakai, I didn't feel like that right hand was even that kind of, it didn't look that damaging. It just looked like a little kind of a dink, and he maybe kind of like lost his footing a little bit and went down. Obviously, jairzinho is a ginormous man with probably very, you know, hands of absolute brick. But I feel like he should have been given a couple of seconds to get up. You know, we've seen fights in the past where the fighter has not been knocked out, but then tries to get up and they're all wobbly and everything, and the ref calls it anyway. So why not just give them that kind of like, give them that little couple of seconds, give them a couple of seconds just to see if they can make it back, clear their head. And the fans want to see it, Like I just said, this is a spectator sport. The fans want to see the fight. That is why they are there. That is why we are watching and we are staying up to watch. And just give us that opportunity to watch another round, just give us that opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. And give Augusto Sakai the opportunity as well. Like I said, if he came back off the stool after that first round and he wasn't there, then wave it off, or even mid between the rounds, wave it off. That's cool, But at least give him the opportunity to pick himself up and sit down with 1 second left. Like, no one would have looked at Herb Dean and gone, "What are you doing?" They'd have gone, "Cool, that's the end of the round. He's got through it. Right, let's see how he is."
Yeah,
it was weird. It was weird.
Yeah, it was a strange one. But it is what it is. Every week we'll have these conversations about the gloves, the judges, the refs making decisions. We're not in there. We didn't see what happened. So it's ultimately down to their discretion, isn't it? And there's not a great amount we can do. All we can do, George, is pray, hope and pray that 263 is going to be better than the past 5 fight nights that we've had that have been like a soggy sandwich. Like your mum's made you a sandwich, you're on a school trip, it's baking hot, you've left it in your lunchbox, you've sat on it, and you take it out at lunchtime and you go, "Oh, great. I'm going to eat it because I have to, and I ain't got any pocket money, but I don't really want to." They're the fight nights that we've had, right? And we're all aware of that. But fingers crossed, because next week we've got some absolute bangers. And obviously there was a telephone call between Israel Adesanya and Marvin Vettori yesterday during the actual televised fights, which I thought it was a nice little addition. And obviously we lost a fight, so they needed to kind of like bulk up some time. But I thought it was a nice little addition to have them guys kind of have a little chat. What did you take away from that? Because I felt like Israel Adesanya was being very kind of putting him down, putting Marvin Vettori down a little bit and saying that, he didn't do anything, blah, blah, blah. But he went the distance and he definitely won a round. Do you know what I mean? Some would argue that he won 2 rounds.
Yeah, what I've realised is that they're not best friends, are they? They really don't like each other, which is great. That's how it should. That's how we want fights to be. Sometimes they don't like each other. Cool. I actually rewatched the fight back ahead of our podcast tomorrow, and despite Izzy definitely won 1 and 2, but that third round with the takedowns, obviously Vettori won that round because he got the takedowns, but he did nothing with the takedowns. He kind of just laid on top of him. There wasn't like he started to then add more damage to Adesanya. He just kind of like took him down and laid on top of him. And so I think this is the big kind of question, which obviously we'll talk about tomorrow, is if Vettori does get him down, is he going to do more work? Because he's got to do more work. Otherwise, it's just a pointless exercise again. Obviously they're talking about Vettori being better than he was 3 years ago, but let's be frank about it as well. I think Izzy's probably got better in the last 3 years. So, yeah, it's a really interesting fight. I think it's a great main event. It had to happen, obviously, with Whittaker not wanting to turn around very quickly. Vettori's on this great winning streak. There is that kind of needle and that hate between the two of them. It makes total sense for a main event. And yeah, man, let's pray that 263, nothing happens. It's all good. And I want to pray as well for Leon Edwards. He's had a rough 2 years, man. I really hope that we get an absolute barn burner with him and Nate Diaz on Saturday night.
Yeah, and it's 5 rounds as well. I think that's so strange that they just kind of went, yeah, you know what? Yeah, we'll have 5 rounds.
That's the Nate Diaz. That's the Nate Diaz effect, man. Exactly. That's the Nate Diaz effect.
He knows that he speeds up in 4 and 5, so he goes, you know what? I want to make it a 5-rounder because I will get put down within the first 1 and 2. I'm really looking forward.
I feel like maybe he might not see rounds 4 and 5, Nate Diaz.
We just don't know.
So
don't know. He's not.
You don't know.
He's not even in the top 15, and he's fighting someone that should be fighting for a title. He could, if he catches a W here at the weekend. We're obviously going to break this down properly tomorrow, but if he catches a W here at the weekend, he could literally be in the top 5. and be fighting for a title very, very soon. I just think that is baffling.
It is baffling, but I'm going to throw it out now before we do it tomorrow. I cannot see Leon Edwards losing. I cannot see it.
If he gets caught on the ground,
That's probably the only way.
Stranger things have happened. Put it that way. Stranger things have happened. Bisping beating Anderson Silva. Stranger things have happened in the UFC. And like I just said, like we just mentioned, we will be breaking down the fights for 263 next week as well. So thank you very much for joining in to the Fight and Talk 2 channel. George over in Casual Corner and in Crush Corner. Think about who's going to be in Crush Corner tomorrow. I'm sure there's a few beautiful looking people on this card. As always, if you want to find some merch, we're on Etsy, so head over there. George is sporting the black and white Fight and Talk 2 t-shirt. We obviously have beanies, but it is 25 degrees here in the UK, and in London it's about 28 degrees because it's humid as hell. So maybe just stick to the t-shirt instead of the beanie. But George, thank you very much, and we will see everyone next time. Thank you.